When predators answer the call. The bridge of the UES Prometheus buzzed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Sarah Chen reviewed the morning reports from Earth Command. Her weathered hands moved across the holographic displays with practiced ease, cataloging patrol routes and supply manifests. At 52, she had spent more years in space than most people spent in their careers, and her silver-streaked hair bore testament to countless battles fought in the void between stars. The Terran Defense Fleet's 3rd Battle Group hung in space near the outer rim of human territory, a formation of 25 warships that represented humanity's farthest reach into the galaxy. Each vessel was a testament to human engineering, built with the practical efficiency that Earth's harsh environment had bred into its children. No elegant curves or artistic flourishes like the ships of other species, just raw functionality wrapped in armor plating thick enough to stop asteroids. Lieutenant Commander Alex Rodriguez, the ship's communications officer, straightened at his station with sudden alertness. His dark eyes reflected the blue glow of his console as streams of data cascaded across his screen. Rodriguez had served under Chen for 8 years, and she knew his body language well enough to recognize when something unusual was happening. Chen moved to his station with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades adapting to artificial gravity. Her boots made soft sounds against the metal deck plating, a rhythm that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. The bridge around them hummed with the quiet sounds of a warship at readiness, dozens of crew members manning their stations with the professional competence that marked humanity's military forces. Rodriguez looked up as she approached, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. He had been monitoring the usual comms and communication channels when something extraordinary had appeared on his screens. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, encrypted with mathematical principles that seemed almost artistic in their complexity. The transmission had arrived on a frequency that most species reserved for emergency broadcasts, but the encryption was so sophisticated that it had taken their computer systems nearly an hour to decode it. What made it even more unusual was that the encryption seemed designed to be broken, as if the sender wanted their message to be understood but needed to hide it from someone else. Chen studied the readouts over Rodriguez's shoulder, her tactical mind immediately recognizing the implications. In her years of military service, she had learned to read between the lines of intelligence reports and diplomatic communications. This signal bore all the hallmarks of a civilization in desperate trouble, the kind of desperation that made beings reach out to complete strangers for help. The decoded message materialized on the main screen as a holographic projection, showing a tall, graceful being with pale green skin and large, luminous eyes. The creature's features were delicate and refined, suggesting a species that had evolved in peaceful conditions far from the predatory pressures that had shaped humanity. When it spoke, its voice carried a musical quality that seemed designed for poetry rather than pleas for survival. The alien identified itself as Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective, a civilization that had thrived for millennia in the Andromeda Spiral. The Zephyrians were artists and philosophers, a species that had never known war or conflict. Their worlds were gardens of crystal cities and floating spires, places where beauty and knowledge flourished under the light of twin suns. But now their paradise was burning. The Voidborn swarm had entered their space 3 days ago, a plague of organic warships that consumed everything in their path. The swarm was a force of pure destruction, creatures that fed on the life force of entire planets and left nothing but dead rock in their wake. They had already consumed 18 Zephyrian worlds, and the remainder would fall within hours. Veltar's image flickered with static as explosions lit the sky behind him. His elegant features were marked by exhaustion and despair, the look of someone who had watched his entire civilization crumble. He spoke of children who would never see another sunrise, of art galleries melting under alien fire, of libraries containing the wisdom of ages turning to ash. The most damning part of his message was not what the swarm had done, but what the galaxy had failed to do in response. 14 different civilizations had received the Zephyrian distress call, species with vast fleets and advanced technology who could have made a difference. All had refused to help, claiming that the Voidborn swarm was unstoppable, and that intervention would only lead to their own destruction. Chen felt her jaw tighten as she absorbed the implications. The galaxy's great civilizations, the Altarian Empire with its 1,000 worlds, the crystalline hegemony with its energy-based technology, the Voidwalkers with their dimension-spanning abilities, all had turned their backs on the dying Zephyrians. They had calculated the odds and found them lacking, choosing preservation over principle. Captain Jake Morrison, Chen's executive officer, joined them at the communications station. At 38, he was young for his rank, but his tactical brilliance and innovative thinking had earned him rapid promotion through the fleet hierarchy. His brown hair was regulation short, and his green eyes held the sharp intelligence that marked humanity's best military minds. Morrison studied the tactical data streaming in from long-range sensors, his expression growing more grave with each update. The Voidborn swarm numbered in the thousands, a vast horde of biological warships that moved through space like a plague of locusts. Their vessels defied conventional understanding, grown rather than built, with hull designs that seemed to shift and adapt in real time. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived on the bridge, summoned by the priority alert that accompanied first contact protocols. As the fleet's chief xenobiologist, she was responsible for analyzing alien life forms and developing strategies for dealing with non-human species. Her expertise had proven invaluable during humanity's expansion into the galaxy, helping them navigate the complex web of interstellar politics. Vasquez was a small woman with prematurely gray hair, aged by years of studying the galaxy's more dangerous life forms. Her tablet computer contained detailed files on hundreds of alien species, but the Voidborn swarm represented something new and terrifying. They were not a civilization in any recognizable sense, but rather a force of nature given malevolent intelligence. The doctor's analysis painted a grim picture. The Voidborn were biological weapons of mass destruction, creatures that had been engineered or evolved to consume entire biospheres. They fed on the life energy of planets, growing stronger with each world they devoured. Their hips were living organisms that could regenerate damage and adapt their weapons in real time, making them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional warfare. General Marcus Stone, commander of the fleet's marine contingent, studied the tactical display with professional interest. Stone was a career soldier who had fought in every major human conflict of the past 2 decades, from the Martian Independence War to the asteroid mining disputes. His scarred hands and weathered face spoke of someone who had seen combat up close and personal. Stone's assessment was brutally honest. Fighting the Voidborn swarm would be suicide by any rational military standard. The enemy outnumbered them by more than 100 to 1, possessed superior technology, and had never been defeated in open combat. Standard military doctrine called for strategic withdrawal and the preservation of human forces for more winnable battles. Chen listened to her officer's analysis with the patience of someone who had faced impossible odds before. She had commanded fleets in 3 major conflicts, each time finding ways to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat through careful planning and the innovative thinking that marked humanity's approach to warfare. But this situation was different, the odds more overwhelming than anything she had previously encountered. The admiral walked to the main viewport and stared out at the stars beyond. Earth hung in the distance, a blue marble that had given birth to a species unlike any other in the galaxy. Humanity had evolved on a death world, a planet where survival required constant adaptation and the willingness to fight against impossible odds. Every human carried the genetic memory of ancestors who had faced down predators, survived ice ages, and conquered a world that had tried to kill them at every turn. Other species in the galaxy had evolved on garden worlds, places of plenty where cooperation and peaceful coexistence were the keys to survival. They had developed advanced civilizations based on logic and mutual benefit, creating vast interstellar empires that spanned thousands of systems. But when faced with something truly alien and hostile, they calculated the odds and chose preservation over principle. Humans were different. They had been forged in the fires of a hostile world, shaped by millions of years of predator and prey relationships. They understood violence in ways that peaceful species could not, and they possessed something that advanced civilizations had forgotten: the willingness to fight and die for strangers. Chen turned back to her bridge crew, seeing in their faces the same determination that had carried humanity from the caves of Africa to the stars themselves. Rodriguez waited at his station, ready to transmit whatever orders she gave. Morrison stood by the tactical display, already calculating possible attack vectors. Vasquez clutched her tablet, prepared to analyze any alien threat they might encounter. Stone checked his sidearm, a gesture as old as humanity itself. The Admiral activated the fleet-wide communication system, her voice carrying to every ship in the battle group. 25 vessels full of humans who had volunteered to venture into the unknown depths of space, each one carrying the genetic legacy of survivors who had never learned to surrender. Her words were simple and direct, carrying the weight of humanity's core values. The Zephyrians were dying, and the galaxy had abandoned them to their fate. 14 civilizations with vast fleets and advanced technology had calculated the odds and chosen safety over sacrifice. But humans were not like other species. They had been shaped by a world that taught them to protect the weak and fight against impossible odds. The response from her captains came back within minutes, each ship's commander acknowledging the order without hesitation. No one requested transfer to safer duties. No one questioned the wisdom of facing an enemy that had never been defeated. They understood what Chen understood, that some things were more important than survival, and that humanity's place in the galaxy would be defined by how they responded to moments like these. The fleet began preparations for the hyperspace jump to Zephyrian space, crews working with the efficient precision that marked human military forces. Engineers checked weapon systems and armor plating. Marines cleaned their rifles and sharpened their combat knives. Pilots ran final diagnostics on their fighters, preparing for a battle that would test every skill they had learned. As the UES Prometheus and its escort ships powered up their jump drives, long-range sensors detected something that chilled Chen to the bone. The Voidborn swarm was not just attacking the Zephyrian collective. Similar distress calls were being received from 3 other sectors, each reporting the arrival of massive biological fleets bent on consumption and destruction. This was not a localized attack, but the beginning of a galactic-scale assault, one that would consume dozens of civilizations if left unchecked. The advanced species that had refused to help the Zephyrians would soon face the same choice themselves: fight or be devoured. But humanity would not wait for the threat to reach their own borders. They had received a call for help from beings who had never done them harm, and that was enough. The human fleet jumped into hyperspace, racing toward a battle that would define their species' future and prove to the galaxy that Earth had indeed bred a race of warriors unlike any other. Why Deathworlders don't surrender? The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian space to witness devastation on a scale that defied comprehension. What had once been the jewel of the Andromeda spiral now resembled a charnel house of dead worlds and floating debris. 7 of the collective's most beautiful planets hung in space like blackened skulls, their atmospheres stripped away by the feeding of the Voidborn swarm. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. The tactical display painted a picture of systematic destruction that spoke to an intelligence both alien and malevolent. The Voidborn had not simply conquered the Zephyrian worlds, they had consumed them, leaving nothing but lifeless rock where gardens of crystal had once flourished. The enemy fleet was even more massive than their worst projections had suggested. Thousands of organic vessels filled the space around the remaining Zephyrian colonies, their twisted hull designs resembling deep-sea predators crossed with mechanical nightmares. Each ship pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of life, but life perverted into something hungry and hostile. Captain Morrison worked frantically at the sensor station, his fingers dancing across holographic controls as he tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The Voidborn vessels defied every principle of starship design that humans understood. They had no visible engines, yet moved with impossible grace. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, adapting their configuration in real time to meet changing tactical needs. Dr. Vasquez joined him at the science station, her xenobiological expertise finally encountering something that pushed the boundaries of her understanding. The Void-born ships were not just alive, they were ecosystems unto themselves. Each vessel contained thousands of different organisms working in perfect symbiosis, creating weapons and defenses that could adapt faster than any mechanical system. The doctor's voice carried a mixture of fascination and horror as she explained what the sensors were revealing. The Void-born fed on life itself, converting the bioelectric energy of dying organisms into power for their ships and weapons. They had turned the act of genocide into a form of sustenance, creating a civilization based entirely on the consumption of others. A priority transmission cut through the analysis, its source a damaged Zephyrian vessel fleeing toward the outer system. Ambassador Veltar appeared on the main screen, his elegant features now marked by exhaustion and despair. Behind him, the crystal corridors of his ship flickered with emergency lighting, and the sounds of damage control teams echoed in the background. Veltar's large eyes widened as he recognized the human vessels. His species had maintained extensive databases on the galaxy's civilizations, but humanity was relatively new to interstellar politics. Most established species regarded them as primitive newcomers, a young race that had barely left their home system before proclaiming themselves ready to join galactic civilization. The Zephyrian ambassador struggled to understand why these newcomers had answered his people's call when advanced civilizations with centuries of experience had refused. The humans possessed only 25 ships against thousands, and their technology was crude compared to the energy-based weapons and dimensional manipulation devices used by the galaxy's great powers. Chen stepped forward to address the alien diplomat, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in desperate battles. She explained that humanity had received the Zephyrian distress call and come to render aid, despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Her words were simple and direct, carrying no diplomatic flourishes or complex explanations. Veltar was silent for a long moment, as if trying to process a concept that his species had never encountered. The Zephyrians were philosophers and artists who resolved conflicts through dialogue and mutual understanding. The idea that strangers would risk their lives for people they had never met was almost impossible for him to comprehend. The ambassador's voice trembled as he described what his people had endured over the past 3 days. The Void-born attacked with methodical precision, surrounding each world before beginning a systematic harvesting process. They used captured populations as living components in their bioships, converting entire civilizations into organic machinery for their war fleet. General Stone studied the tactical situation with professional detachment, his military mind cataloging strengths and weaknesses even in the face of impossible odds. The Void-born moved in organized formations that spoke of hive mind intelligence, but their attack patterns showed a disturbing consistency. They had grown overconfident after centuries of easy victories against peaceful species. Morrison highlighted something on the tactical display that made Chen lean forward with interest. The Void-born were not invincible, despite their reputation. Their bioships required time to adapt to new threats, and their tactics remained consistent because they had never faced serious resistance. Every species they had encountered so far had either fled or surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. Dr. Vasquez added her own observations to the analysis. The Void-born were perfect predators, but like all apex predators, they had evolved to hunt specific types of prey. Their victims had always been peaceful civilizations with no concept of warfare, species that folded immediately when faced with violence. They had never encountered something truly dangerous. Chen felt a cold smile cross her lips as the tactical picture became clear. The galaxy's great civilizations had refused to fight the Void-born because they calculated the odds and found them lacking. But they had made their calculations based on their own experiences, their own understanding of acceptable losses and strategic objectives. Humans were different. They came from a world where survival had required constant adaptation and the willingness to face down predators twice their size. Earth had taught them that sometimes the only choice was to fight, even when victory seemed impossible. More importantly, it had taught them how to kill things that were bigger and stronger than they were. The Admiral activated the fleet communication system, her words carrying to every human ship in the formation. She spoke of duty and honor, of the responsibility that came with strength and the price of standing by while innocents died. Her crew listened with the attention of people who understood that they were about to make history. Chen's orders were precise and tactical, drawing on decades of military experience and the innovative thinking that marked humanity's approach to warfare. The human fleet would not engage the Voidborn in a direct confrontation where numbers could overwhelm them. Instead, they would use their ship's superior speed and maneuverability to conduct hit-and-run attacks, targeting the enemy's command structure and supply lines. The battle began with a coordinated strike by human fighter squadrons, small craft that could slip past the Voidborn's heavy defenses to attack vulnerable points on their bioships. The pilots flew with reckless courage, threading their fighters between organic weapons that could have vaporized them instantly. Their attacks focused on the sensory organs and neural clusters that controlled the enemy vessels. Captain Morrison led the FTS first wave of fighters personally, his tactical genius translating into instinctive understanding of three-dimensional combat. He identified weak points in the Voidborn formation and exploited them with surgical precision, his squadron dancing between enemy ships like wolves harrying a herd of massive herbivores. The Voidborn response was swift but predictable, their bioships adapting their defenses to counter the human fighter attacks. But Chen had anticipated this, and the second wave of human ships struck, while the enemy was focused on the fighters. Heavy cruisers unleashed concentrated firepower on Voidborn command vessels, using weapons designed to punch through asteroid belts to devastating effect. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded galactic history. The humans fought with a ferocity that shocked both their enemies and the observers from other civilizations who had come to witness the destruction of another peaceful species. They used tactics that bordered on suicidal, sacrificing individual ships to achieve strategic objectives that advanced species would never have considered worthwhile. General Stone's Marines conducted boarding actions against disabled Voidborn vessels, fighting hand-to-hand in the organic corridors of alien warships. They moved through bioship interiors like the apex predators they were, hunting enemy crew members with weapons and techniques perfected in Earth's most hostile environments. The turning point came when Dr. Vasquez identified a crucial weakness in the Voidborn hive mind structure. The bioships communicated through bioelectric fields that could be disrupted by precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. Human vessels began broadcasting interference patterns that threw the enemy formation into chaos, turning their coordination advantage into a liability. Morrison seized the opportunity with brilliant tactical timing, leading his remaining fighters in a desperate assault on the Voidborn fleet's central command organism. The bioship was a massive creature that served as the nerve center for thousands of smaller vessels, directing their movements through thought patterns older than human civilization. The assault succeeded at terrible cost, with human fighters sacrificing themselves to deliver nuclear warheads into the command organism's neural core. The explosion that followed sent psychic shockwaves through the entire Voidborn fleet, stunning them into temporary immobility just long enough for the human capital ships to press their advantage. Admiral Chen coordinated the final assault with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a predator. Human warships targeted the most dangerous Voidborn vessels first, using concentrated firepower to overwhelm their adaptive defenses before they could respond. The battle became a cascade of destruction as the enemy fleet's coordination collapsed. When the shooting finally stopped, nearly half the human fleet had been destroyed or severely damaged. But the Voidborn swarm was gone, their bioships floating dead in space like the corpses of prehistoric monsters. The survivors began the process of rescuing Zephyrian refugees and tending to their wounded. Ambassador Veltar stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, his large eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and incomprehension. His species had witnessed something unprecedented, the defeat of an enemy that had been considered invincible for over a century. But more than that, they had seen why Earth was called a death world and why its children were feared by those who knew their history. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. News of humanity's victory spread through interstellar communique, tie-in networks, reaching civilizations that had dismissed Earth as an insignificant backwater world. The species that had refused to help the Zephyrians found themselves reevaluating their assumptions about the galaxy's newest members. Chen stood at the viewport of her damaged flagship, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so vast or empty. Humanity had announced its presence on the galactic stage in a way that could not be ignored or forgotten. They had shown the universe what happened when someone threatened the innocent in the presence of Deathworld predators. The Admiral's final report to Earth Command was brief and to the point. The mission had been successful, the Zephyrian collective had been saved, and the Voidborn threat had been neutralized. But more importantly, humanity had proven that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. As the surviving human ships prepared for the journey home, long-range sensors detected new signals from across the galaxy. Other species were calling for help, finally recognizing that the universe had produced something that the Voidborn swarm had never encountered before, a race that refused to calculate the odds when lives were at stake. The age of human expansion was beginning, not through conquest or colonization, but through the simple act of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Earth's children had found their place in the galaxy, and that place was wherever courage was needed most.